Before I start, good morning to everyone in the room and online. Before I start, a little bit of housekeeping. Next week there will be no Dharma talk at the Boulder Zen Center because we're going on a wild Dharma trip. A meditation intensive and sitting, walking in the mountains in southern Colorado. And so both Gary and I will be on that trip, so no talk. And then another piece is at the end of the month, last Saturday of September, I will start a course titled Compassionate Action. It's like fourth course in this series of courses that I've given that I'm calling Foundational Zen Teachings. It goes along with sort of the parts of the book that I've published, The Path of Aliveness. And it starts with a seminar on that last weekend of September. And then it runs for 6 weeks. And during that time, there also won't be any public talks. But you can sign up for the course. And it's on a sliding scale, so if finances are an issue, you can find a spot for yourself that you can afford. And if you need a scholarship, please reach out to us, because we don't want anyone to feel excluded from continuing to practice and study. So really feel free to approach us and say what you need. Okay? All right. I've mentioned this fairly often, I think. You may have heard it or not heard it from me, but one of the most important teachings that I feel that I've received from my teacher, Zenki Roshi, was a period of time when he kept saying to me, "Don't worry." And it pissed me off a little bit, because in my experience, I was just being realistic. I was dealing with situations and pointing out, issues and trying to plan ahead and solve problems, and he kept, sort of cutting me off energetically, and say, "Don't worry." Well, I just accepted it, but internally, it's like, I'm not worrying. Right? Okay. Well, so it took me a while to recognize that there was an energy that I was carrying that was giving rise to my behavior and my thoughts that he called worrying, that was uncomfortable with uncertainty or with unpredictability, and was and then I think there's different ways you can find this maybe in your own mind and behavior. There was a way of trying to control the situation or be on top of it, and feeling kind of contracted and losing a sense of openness, right? So I was, every time it happened, the nose was put into this stinky energy of, and I was clearly in denial of it or not denial, I was kind of unaware that was happening. But something miraculous happened in the process, which I don't know, I can't remember, but it was going on for a while, so a couple of years or something. Something miraculous happened for me. It's like a certain kind of thinking mind, a worrying mind, stopped. It just stopped. At some point I recognized, well, I'm not doing this anymore. Now that doesn't mean that I can't, fall back in it. Like, the skill of being controlling doesn't go away. It continues as a possibility. But there's a difference between falling into it now and then, or using it actually, compared to being a kind of unconscious victim to doing it obsessively. So let me call that, not doing it obsessively, let me call that, it stopped. I think for me it coincides with having the experience that discursive thinking in Zazen stopped. I don't have to do it. Okay. Or it's more accurate to say, it doesn't just automatically happen. So, but here's something really interesting. It's like you can't tell yourself to stop worrying. You can't tell your mind to stop thinking discursively. And this discursive thinking is actually a kind of worrying. It's this jumping around trying to plan and regret, and it's a jumbled mess of worrying and distracting yourself from what's really going on. It's difficult to analyze or undo. It's just kind of like the mind is going into this sort of default mode of discursiveness. Okay, so you can't tell yourself intellectually you understand something about your mind and then you tell yourself not to worry or not to think, and it doesn't work. It's just something to acknowledge. It's just like, sit with that. It doesn't work. You've tried it many times. You may keep trying it, and it still doesn't work. That has to sink in too. It has to sink in that it doesn't work. So then the question is, what does work? Now let's stay just with worrying for a moment. I said that the source of the worrying thoughts and behavior was a disturbance that comes from uncertainty and unpredictability, whatever word you want to put there. It's like your life, the world, is out of your control. Now, it's a little bit in control, but not very much. Like the essential things are not in your control. As someone said to me, if you have this object, you have control over this object in the sense you can like drop it, you can pick it up, it's in your control. But that's not important. That's not important. That's not important. What's important is, your health, your living and dying, your relationships. Those are the important things. And those are not in your control. You're just a participant with limited control and influence. So if you do carry this discomfort with, let's call it uncertainty, then you try to do something about it. And one thing that I think our minds is going to do something about this uncertainty is to plan and try to control and, understand the structure of it and, pick it apart and change this part and fiddle around with it and try to fix it and so forth. If you are in a situation where that works, where you can analyze something, get the problem, fix it, and so forth, then that's fine. And you do that, and then the problem is fixed, and then you don't have uncertainty anymore, and then you move on. The reason we experience this discursive and worrying mind is because we try to do that with situations in which that's not possible. You can't do it. And so the uncertainty persists despite your effort. And something I think many people don't quite understand or get is that anxiety and worrying, which are expressions of this existential situation of uncertainty that we're in, are really just a dysfunctional habit of the mind. Now, you could say, if it's dysfunctional, why do you continue it? By the way, this is true for many dysfunctional habits. Like, this is a valuable question to ask, right? Like, why do we continue the dysfunctional habits that we have in our life? Like eating too much, or getting angry, all kinds of, not just physical habits, smoking, drinking, taking drugs, sitting in front of the computer too much, consuming video content. All those kinds of addictive behaviors are all dysfunctional, and yet we continue them. Why is that? It's like you know better, and still you continue. So anxiety actually and worrying falls into that category too. It's like it's dysfunctional, but we continue. We continue because there is a reward. Even in anxiety and worrying, there is a reward. And the reward is, you need to experientially find out for yourself what the reward is, because when I say it, doesn't mean like you get that viscerally, but just to sort of point you to that, I think the reward is something like you have the illusion of doing something, even though you're not doing anything really or only a little piece of taking care of that uncertainty, but your worrying mind gives you the feeling that you are engaged with the situation and you are doing something about it. It's like when you start a project, you start the project with your best effort, you make plans, you get the right people involved, you start the project, you get it going, and then there's a lot of uncertainty how it will unfold. You can keep worrying about it and give yourself the illusion that you are doing all that to really steer the project, but, you've done the best to set it up. Now it's in motion. Now you can do a few things. Yes, you can participate, but there's a course that this unfolding takes that isn't fully in control. So, but the worry, sometimes people say like, I can't give up my worrying, anxious mind because like that's necessary because that's like how I am involved. And so we actually do have a positive feeling about that. But for most people, and it can really get out of control for most people, that constant involvement with an anxious, worrying mind is, destructive. It's not positive. Now, I don't recommend very many books, but here's one that I can wholeheartedly recommend. If you want to understand this, there's a book called Unwinding Anxiety, written by Judson Brewer, and he's a psychiatrist. And I found, when I read the book, that he, it's like, it shows the same kind of conclusions that I've come to in my own practice. But the book is helpful because it combines neuroscience and reward-based learning and mindfulness practice in showing what you can do to dismantle dysfunctional habits, not just anxiety, but all kinds of habits. It's very powerful. So, I don't know. Most people don't read books anymore. That's just the truth. Oh, yeah, Judson Brewer uses a phrase that I think is quite entertaining and also frightening. He talks about the weapons of mass distractions. The era of the weapons of mass distraction that we live in. And I think this is quite true. Okay, so one of the most common questions that arises in practice and that I get a lot in various forms is how do I bring practice into my everyday life? And I have a kind of default idea for an answer in my mind. Right? It's like, well, it starts with, well, I don't know why, but well, it's pretty simple. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's pretty simple. You continue to stay present. So what's your practice on the cushion or in the zendo? Your practice is to be present. And how do you bring that practice into your daily life? You continue doing that. So it's pretty simple. Why is that not satisfying as an answer? It's like, it's not, like, it is satisfying intellectually, but why is it not really satisfying? Because it's difficult to stay present. And many of us have the feeling that we fail at that. We fail at staying present all the time. And then if you have, like, secondary habit loops that link into your sense of failure, you beat yourself up over it, you think you're not good enough, or you try harder to do more of the thing that doesn't work. So, not all of us in the room and in the online room right now are experienced meditators, and not all of us have done extensive retreat time or something, But if you have done a retreat, what happens on a retreat? Like, why is a retreat, despite its difficulty, particularly in the Zen style, despite its difficulty, why is it so satisfying? It's like this thing of, you go to a sesshin and it's so hard and so difficult and painful, While you're sitting, you're like, why did I sign up for this? And then at the end of the sesshin, you're like, something happened, right? And you sign up for another one. Like, this is incredible. Like, what is it? What is it that happens there? Despite the pain. What is it? Some shift happens. And there's a shift into, I'm just using some words to bring up a feeling in you, there's a shift into being more present. Like, how does that manifest? It manifests in feeling more located in your body. Okay? You feel more located in your body. You've folded attention into breath and body sensations over, let's say, 3 days. And after those 3 days, a kind of shift happens and you feel more located in your body. And by feeling more located in your body, you start to feel more located in the space in which you are. You feel more located not just in your body, but in the whole perceptual space. You feel more located in the world. And your body feeling might widen, and what loosens is sort of like your contracted sense of self. And maybe you want to have some spiritual theory about it and feel like you're enlightened, but if you're just staying with your experience, it's like you feel less contracted and you feel more, I said located, or located in the fuller context of your life, perceptually, but also you feel like you can be present to everything that's going on, and it's not freaking you out. And there's a sense of freedom that comes with that, and release, and openness, and connectedness, as everyone's saying, oh, I feel so connectedness, but in the sense that you are willing to allow other people and the circumstances of the world to come forward and meet you, and you allow yourself to meet them, and it isn't so sticky where you have to separate yourself and defend and avoid and so forth, right? It's but it's a kind of whole, all over the place shift that happens, that you didn't think your way to. You just sat your way into it by folding attention into what is actually going on, breath, body, and phenomena. Now, if you're an experienced practitioner, you might, in your daily sitting practice, sit down, and after 10 minutes, that shift occurs. And that's satisfying. And then you get that shift, and then it's if you sit in the morning, it primes your day a bit. But it can also fade away. Which is when the question arises, how do I bring practice into my everyday life? Because there's this fading away that's happening. I don't know why, it just happens. For most people, it happens. Okay, but even if you are a new practitioner and that shift doesn't happen after 10 minutes and you feel pretty effortful in your practice, you feel like you're laboring quite a bit, making an effort to bring attention to breath, body, and phenomena. There still is a satisfaction in that you are maintaining a certain kind of focus. It's like there's a certain sense of focused activity and purpose in your activity. There's something you're taking this time to do this practice, and you have a certain kind of faith, or you pretend you have that faith. But there is that satisfaction of just creating focus, when in contrast to your usual distracted mind. And I think it's important to savor that feeling of satisfaction, of focus, or that larger shift that I just described or pointed to. Now, when do we lose focus and the feeling of being present and more spaciously located? When does that happen? I would say it happens every time that you are unable or unwilling to be with an occurrence in your life. Now, sometimes we're so focused on what's happening in the so-called outside world, it's like, oh, this happens and it makes me upset. And so you're trying to fix your life by controlling the circumstances of your life. But what I say this quite often, the real problem is not what happens in the so-called outside world, it's what you feel about it. When something happens and a disturbing feeling arises, it's that disturbing feeling that you are not willing to feel. Maybe it seems you're unable to feel it, or you're unwilling to feel it, or it's just like, or it's actually quite unconscious. Like, it's just not you. What do you do when something arises that you don't want to feel? You go to something else. So it's like, this is where this, the science of habit and reward-based learning and so forth is really useful and important, because you can realize, oh, when there's a trigger, when I have a disturbing feeling, then I engage in a certain kind of behavior. Well, let's take something from my life. I enjoy eating. If I have a disturbing feeling, I go and eat something. I open the fridge. I know this. Do you know these moments, like you go to the fridge, you stand in front of the fridge. It's like, why did I open the fridge? If you're present enough, you close the fridge. If you're not present enough, I'm saying this also as a metaphor, right? You open the fridge, here is the ability to go to your favorite food, you go eat it. What's the reward? The reward is that you get this, like, you get the taste of your favorite food. And if I'm honest with myself, the taste of my favorite food isn't actually so important. What's more important is that I feel kind of full in my belly. What does the fullness in the belly, when I investigate what the fullness in my belly does, it overrides the disturbing feeling that I have in my belly. Much of my feelings are in my belly. Some people are more, they feel anxiety in their heart, and most emotions are. But for me, a lot is in the belly. So if I eat, it's great, because then I feel full. It feels kind of bad, but I don't have to feel the feeling, right? I present it sort of humorously, but it's awful. Because it's like your mind engages you in a behavior that ultimately you find actually not good. Depending on what it is, you put on weight, you feel full and bloated, you realize that you're really not in control of your life, you're like driven by these sort of habit loops. This is all not pleasant. But you continue doing it. So this is just one example. What is it? It's a defense against a feeling I don't want to feel. And I may have done this habit for a long time, so I don't even really notice it much, why it kicks in. It just kicks in, but I deal with the consequences. And then I feel defeated and like a failure, and I don't know what to do, so forth. As I have written in my own book on the topic of habits, and then I found it in Dr. Judd, he's called Judson Brewer's book, confirmed. It's like I said, well, we're all addicted. These habits are all basically addictions. Addiction, the dictionary definition of addiction is, continued behavior despite dysfunctional consequences or adverse consequences or something. And everyone's doing it. Some people are mired more deeply than others, or sometimes you get into certain behaviors that are way more destructive than others. But everyone's doing it. And in the era of mass distraction, it's like, it's terrible. I'm really worried. I'm really worried for society, is because it's like with this immediate availability, it's like now whenever you have this feeling of like, here's a feeling that I can't cope with, like you can just go and shop for something, watch a video, get into something you're interested, and then all of that content is programmed to get you addicted. It uses the science of reward-based learning to get you hooked. And at this point, I think everyone who has a cell phone is basically addicted to it. And it's maybe, with few exceptions. And it's important to bring some self-compassion to that situation, I think. It's like, wow, I am being trapped in this attention economy, and because I'm just like every other human being. I have this reward-based learning mechanism programmed basically into my nervous system, and they figured out to hack my nervous system, and I fall prey to it. It's like we're all doing it. And when you talk to people about it, it's like, oh no, like this is all interesting, and it's great, and this is all true. There's a tool that is immensely powerful. At the same time, it's like an addiction-creating machine. And everything is right there at your finger. You can have everything, and you shop for something, it comes to your doorstep. Next day, I just did that this morning. And you get this like, it's going to be delivered tomorrow. And I still rub my eyes. Really? Sometimes the same day. Well, that same day delivery or next day delivery is part of how these algorithms are getting you addicted, because immediate reward is just more rewarding. Anyway, I'm concerned, but don't worry. Now, I think the self-compassion is useful if you can bring yourself into that practice, because it's not our fault. It's like we live in a certain kind of context, cultural context, and life in the 1800s was very challenging in certain ways, but life in the 21st century has really different challenges, and those challenges are new and unique to our time, and I'm afraid we haven't really evolved enough to meet them. There's different ways of being exploited. Right now, I think we're exploited in an attention economy. And if you want to, I don't think it's going to get better. I think it's going to get worse. So there's a real need to understand what's going on so that you can stay out, that you can hold yourself apart from these attention traps. I'm concerned that it's you can be enslaved to alcohol and you can be enslaved to algorithms. So what do we do? So the responsibility of understanding what's going on and staying present with what's going on and liberate yourself from that and lead a life that is, that you can call yours it's important. I think it's the task of our time. There are other tasks of our time, but that's one. It's an important one. And like I said, I think it's going to get worse, not better. I mean, by better, I mean it's not like the society is going to sit down. However, that's not possible anyway, but let's just imagine this society sits down and decides, oh, we're going to like give up social media. That's not going to happen. It's going to get worse, as you know from the discussion about artificial intelligence. Okay, that's just, a cultural context. So it's not your fault. It's not my fault that I'm like living in an environment that makes it so easy to get addicted. But it's still my responsibility to see through it and do something about it. Change my relationship to that environment, which also means change my relationship to the triggers, the disturbing feelings. So what are the practices that we need? If you're a Zen practitioner, if you've done this for a while, you sit still in the midst of disturbing physical and emotional feelings. You train yourself to be present in the midst of those disturbing feelings. Now, how do you bring practice into your daily life? You kind of have to go, I think, directly to the places of disturbance. Not have some general feeling of like, oh, I'll bring practice into my life, which means like you stay present with your breath, you stay embodied. Those are good practices, but I think it's actually necessary to go to the places where we go unconscious into habit loops. Like as Judson Brewer says in his book, you need to map out your habit loops. You need to, like in my language, it would be you need to find out where you get hooked by certain behaviors that you actually know you don't want to continue. It's like those places in our life really deserve our attention. When this happens, I always get angry, It's like you can say like, oh, that's just my personality. Or you can say, that's a habit loop that I'm in. What's the feeling that I'm trying to mask with the feeling of getting angry? Because anger feels better than what? Than feeling hurt? Vulnerable? Not respected? Now, when I say these words, those are not really the feelings. There are body sensations underlying them, and those are what's disturbing. So that I don't want to feel that vulnerable feeling. It's very intimate, and it feels better to get angry. Short term, it feels better. It's just like you open the fridge, it feels good to eat your favorite food. It feels good to get angry, right, for a moment. But then the adverse consequences are actually really bad. So I'm just, it's hard because it's almost like we have to. I had this idea, and the talk kind of came together for me. It's like, maybe we should have a habit lab or something, like just to like do this together, like go to like map it out, talk about like what are the behaviors I'm substituting for unwanted, disturbing feelings. Now, the way I have always approached this is do a little mini zazen in the midst of your daily life. Like you stand in front of the fridge, like again, metaphorically and literally. Open the fridge, you have access to your substitute behavior. And do a little mini zazen. Feel the situation. Do nothing. But stay present. Be aware of what's going on. Be aware of the feeling that you're trying to mask or medicate. Be present to how you want to do this behavior, how you have a real urge to do it. And then also be aware of awareness itself. Because being aware of awareness itself is like there is something deeply rewarding in it. Like you have your life back. You're going to have to learn to savor the reward that comes from being present. I really encourage you to read this book, so I'll mention it again. It's like in Dr. Judd's language, this is the bigger, better offer that the brain gets. Mindful presence is the bigger, better offer. To change a habit, the mind does need a bigger reward. You can't think your way to it. You have to actually do a behavior that has the bigger reward. So what he's studying basically in the lab is that mindful presence is a bigger reward. There are positive feelings that come from being curious about, what am I doing right now? What is it really giving me? You're present. You are actually located in your body and in the context of your life, and you feel like you are back in the driver's seat. That is more rewarding than doing this short-term fix in your addictive behavior, which is true for eating and for getting angry and for watching too many YouTube videos or whatever your go-to behavior is. So there's one thing that I encourage you, do your daily practice. Do sit. Establish this focus of weaving attention into breath, body, and, phenomena, sense perception. Notice, be on the lookout for this shift, which is rewarding. This shift of being located, embodied, located in your body, located contextually. And then if you do have this question of how do I bring practice into my daily life, go to the places where you stop being present and see if you are willing to be present in the moments from which you check out. And one way you can do that is actually to study the map of your unwanted habit, of your dysfunctional habits that you are already kind of disgusted with. Because those habits are pointing you to the moments in which you don't stay present. And they give you access directly to the places where it is necessary to stay present. Because otherwise, bringing practice into your daily life has the flavor of like, now and then I remind myself to be with my breath, and then I forget, and then I beat myself up over how I'm a bad practitioner. But here you can bring something together. You can practice staying present, which is already your intention, and you can do it in a place where you already want to actually make a change in your life, which is facilitated. That change in your life, like letting go of a dysfunctional habit, is actually facilitated by the practice of staying present. Okay, I'll leave it at that.